I live on the west side of Buffalo, New York, in a second-floor rental over a bodega that sells batteries, scratch-offs, and the kind of coffee that forgives a long night. If I lean out our kitchen window, I can see the river pretending to be a lake and the Peace Bridge lit like a polite celebration. I'm 39, divorced, a maintenance tech for a small property company that buys tired houses and asks me to make them honest. My daughter, Ava, is 8 and can identify snow types like an old man. People say Buffalo is good at winter. That's true until it isn't. The year this story lives in, the city kept warning about blocked vents and dead batteries in carbon monoxide detectors. I nodded at the TV like it could see me. On my rounds, I told tenants to check theirs. I even carried spare batteries in my pocket like good intentions. On the Friday the wind made the hinges sing, I left work early to beat the whiteout. The sky shut like a garage door. Ava's mom, my ex, Jen, texted to say the roads were a mess and asked if she should keep Ava. I looked at the window, which had decided to be a snow globe, and typed, "Yes, keep her warm. Cookies recommended." I heated soup, added too many crackers, and meant to read the manual for the space heater I'd bought from the bodega because our radiators only do their job when they feel like it. I remember small things from that night with a clarity that feels rude. The apartment smelled like wet wool and tomato. A draft snake Jen sewed curled against the back door like a pet doing its job too well. Around 10 the lights flickered and then died. The street went to blackout, that thick dark you can feel. I plugged the heater into a long orange cord because the outlet felt loose and told myself I'd fix it in the morning. The last thing I remember clearly is a cartoon Ava drew of me shoveling while saying, "I love snow less now." I taped it to the fridge crooked, sat on the couch with the heater by my shins, and promised I'd stay up 20 minutes to make sure the flame stayed blue. I woke on the kitchen floor to a banging that sounded like a dream trying to become a door. My head rang like a bell. When I got the door open, Sergeant Rodriguez from BPD stood on the landing wearing a headlamp that cut a cone through the snow. Behind him, a firefighter's portable monitor beeped numbers that looked like weather warnings. "CO alarm downstairs," he said. "Whole stack's hot." They put an oxygen mask over my face and the world snapped into smaller squares. I said, "My neighbor Luca," and the firefighter said, "We're in." Their boots bit the stairs like certainty. I sat shivering while the meter climbed and somebody said, "You're lucky." The word felt like a verdict that skipped evidence. At Mercy, a doctor explained that carbon monoxide is a thief with good manners. No smell, no sting, just quietly steals your seat at the oxygen table. My level was high but not chamber high. He said the storm had packed the furnace flue with snow, the draft snake trapped the rest, and the space heaters recalled plug helped everything argue in the worst direction. I nodded like I deserved a citation I would never receive. Outside, wind stacked snow against the sills like a patient animal. They kept me overnight because the storm had pinned first responders like thumbtacks. The hospital smelled like generator and coffee. Rodriguez stopped by in a coat Salt had tattooed white. He told me what they found. A flue packed with wind-driven snow, a recalled plug space heater, a back door sealed too tight by my draft snake. "Your detector?" he asked, eyebrows giving me a chance. "On the counter," I said, throat hot. "No batteries?" "Batteries," I said. "Not on the wall." In the morning, a social worker with the calm of someone who has seen most kinds of loss sat on the radiator and said my neighbor Luca hadn't made it. She said his name carefully, like carrying a glass through a narrow doorway. I saw him right away the way I liked him best. Leaning in his window in summer, watering basil. Walking his crashy dog, Etta, bandana always seasonal. Calling up to me, "Bills by 3," like a spell meant to keep the city together. I nodded like a bobblehead and couldn't stand up. Grief made the room the wrong size. The chaplain said forgiveness is an address you don't have to know yet. Jen didn't say, "I told you so." She said, "Ava's fine. You're alive. We'll take the next part slow." When the road stopped being a dare, Rodriguez drove me back because this city is secretly a small town. The landlord stood on the stairs wearing his "We roll in this" smile. The downstairs door had police tape and a sign that did the talking. Etta's leash hung on a hook like a sentence without a verb. Back in my kitchen, the space heater sat like a suspect. The detector on the counter looked like a prop from a play I'd walked out on. I carried it to the hardware store on Niagara and bought 3. A plug-in with backup, a battery-only with a hush button, and a talking combo unit because if a device can shout at me, maybe this time I'll listen. The clerk said they'd been flying all morning. I taped a recall notice for my heater to the bodega register. Sal, the owner, told everyone the tickets were cursed and the heaters were worse. Old men nodded and bought batteries like penance. The funeral was small because the city was still digging out. Luca's sister came from Toronto wrapped in a scarf that looked like home. Etta sat in the front row wearing snowmen. The priest talked about breath and spirit and how in some languages they share the same word. People told stories about pasta that rescued Tuesdays and how Luca remembered your order even when you didn't. I didn't speak. All I had were sentences that started with I should have. After, I stood by the coffee urn and listened to other people carry him out loud. I went back to work because rent has no respect for grief. I changed 100 filters in 2 days and returned a dozen calls about furnaces that smell wrong. I bought a flue brush and started carrying it like a baton. At night I read more than was good for me. OSHA limits, binding affinities, case reports with cool fonts that made ugly stories look tidy. My therapist later said this is what grief does when it finds a tool. It tries to turn it into a ladder back to the day before. I didn't have a therapist yet. I had a drawer with batteries and a head that wouldn't stop doing math. That week the headaches came like weather fronts. Dull, insistent, gone by noon. The discharge sheet called them expected and suggested water, rest, patience. I tried all 3 and added superstition. I kept the hospital oxygen cannula in a drawer like a talisman. When I opened it, the plastic smell snapped me back to the hallway where the meter screamed. When the thaw finally came, the city smelled like wet plywood and hope. Rodriguez connected me with a group that gives out detectors and teaches people what to do that isn't waiting for sirens. They meet in a church basement with coffee that could hold up a spoon. The director, Denisha, short, fast, kind, handed me a milk crate of alarms and a stack of forms. Knock 3 times, she said. Introduce yourself. Names matter. 1 on every level, 1 near bedrooms, 1 by the boiler if they've got one. I started on my block. Mrs. Alvarez let me stand on her dining chair while her grandson filmed for Facebook, because everything counts as outreach if somebody clicks like. In the yellow house with the leaning porch, a guy named Malik showed me a space heater plugged into a cheap orange cord snaking under a rug. That cord is a poem with a bad ending, I said. He laughed, and we ran a new outlet together because sometimes the right sermon is a screwdriver. Word spread the way good gossip does. Denisha texted cross streets and names. I put detectors in double shotgun rentals that had been lying to their owners for decades. I climbed to a 3rd-floor porch where 2 college kids were running a charcoal grill because their power was out and their patience was gone. We scared them on purpose, made soup on a camp stove, and they promised to call their moms. The city council stuck me at the end of the agenda, the part where people go home. I told them about blocked vents and draft snakes that turn murderous when the wind turns rude. I said codes have to travel faster than storms and asked for money for hardwired units in multifamily houses. A councilman thanked me by not looking at his phone once. Denisha smiled like she keeps a scoreboard only she can see. Jen started sending Ava with me on Saturdays when it wasn't my weekend. Community service, she called it. Ava learned the script. Hi, I'm Tony. This is Ava. Can we check your alarms? People let you in when a kid grins. The dog is Etta, now ours. Luca's sister said, please. And that was the whole conversation. One afternoon in April, the talking unit we'd installed in a 2-family on Vermont started yelling while we were still there. Warning, carbon monoxide. I thought the demo mode had gone feral until Denisha said, meter. The handheld began at 30 parts per million and climbed. We found the source in 5 minutes. A car idling in the shared garage because a teenager was just warming it up. The mother cried the way relief makes you. We opened everything that could open and waited with them until the number fell back to human. I called a therapist when I realized I knew more about CO curves than I did about sleep. Dr. Patel had a plant that should have been dead but wasn't, in a way of asking, and then what? That made you tell the truth. She didn't try to glue blame down or rip it off. Make it a window, not a mirror, she said. We practiced, out loud. I made a mistake and I'm learning. I hated it until it helped. In May, the landlord asked if I wanted to move into Luca's unit, renovated, at a discount. I said no so fast my ribs popped. Felt like moving into a eulogy. Instead, I patched my porch and planted basil in a window box that gets more wind than sun. When the leaves came, Etta ate one and looked betrayed. At the park, Ava climbed the last of the plow mountains and announced the air tasted like a freezer pretending to be spring. Summer softened into a forgiving kind of heat. I kept Saturdays for the detector project and took plumbing work on weekdays to pay for it, because grants have their own seasons. The metal at the bodega stopped tasting like snow and went back to tasting like nickels. I went a whole week without picturing my kitchen in grayscale. Progress arrived disguised as ordinary. In August, a reporter called. "We heard you're the carbon monoxide guy," she said. I told her I'd rather be the everyone's detectors work guy. But she came anyway. She filmed Ava on Mrs. Alvarez's dining chair holding a screwdriver like a magic wand. I showed where to mount, how to test, when to replace. I said Luca's name because grief is permission to remember in public. The piece aired between a cat on a Roomba and weather. The comments were kind. Not every door said yes. A man told me detectors were a government plot. A landlord said tenants could buy their own. And Denisha mailed him the code section with a sticky note. See also court. Sometimes the barrier was money. Sometimes pride. Sometimes just the weight of other emergencies stacked like moving boxes. We kept knocking. We left units on porch chairs with instructions in English and Spanish and the universal language of duct tape. That first fall, I spoke at a union meeting for maintenance guys who look like me. Tools in the truck, coffee in the blood, pride arranged like a shield. I passed around the recalled plug from my heater like communion. We all do temporary, I said. Some of it's harmless. Some of it waits. Choose which kind you want to live with. A man with hands like baseball mitts raised his and said, I've been lucky. Me too, I said. Let's make luck unnecessary. In November, the first snow came soft, cooperative. I drove to the cemetery on Amherst with Etta riding shotgun and stood where Luca's name sits under grass that tries. I told him about Ava's science fair and the garage and the talking detector that wouldn't shut up until it had saved someone. You should be here to roll your eyes at me, I said. Wind answered on behalf of everything. On the anniversary, I turned every light off and listened to the building. Radiators ticked. The refrigerator considered. I stood under the detector and pressed test. The voice said, Warning, carbon monoxide. In a tone that made me sit and breathe just to prove I could. Etta forgave me with a sigh. I texted Jen a photo of the glowing alarms. She sent back Ava asleep with a book on her face. She snores like you. Here's what I know, and it isn't a moral so much as a checklist. Crack a window when the wind bullies the house. Keep flues clear and heaters honest. Never bargain with chirps. Put alarms where your hands fall at night. Teach your kid the sound that means get up now. Knock on doors even when you'd rather stay home. Learn people's names so you can say them back when they forget their own in a bad minute. Grief doesn't go away. It changes jobs. Give it work. Ladders, screws, clipboards, Saturdays. I am a man in Buffalo who did a stupid, ordinary thing and lived, and a kind, ordinary man downstairs did not. That sentence will always be a room I have to walk through. On the other side is a milk crate of detectors, a list of addresses, and a dog who dreams hard and forgives even harder. On Saturdays, Ava writes names on the clipboard and I carry a ladder that isn't tall enough for all the ways the world can go wrong. We go anyway. We knock 3 times. We listen. We make the air honest.